I'm in the process of rebuilding a computer that I built back in 2003, and while it was great back when I built it, it's gotten kind of dated, and I recently purchased all of the things you see in the camera and figured while I was doing this rebuild I would have you come along for the ride and we'll do some unboxing and show you the different pieces of the new machine as I'm building it. Here we have an AMD Ryzen 7 1700 processor. I think this was the 8 cores and 16 threads, so it's fairly high zoot. It's 3 gigahertz on its base clock and 3.7 gigahertz on its overclock boost clock. So it's fairly fast. It's certainly faster than the old Pentium 4 2.53 gigahertz machine or processor that I had in the computer before. So here we are. We're going to just cut into it and show you what we got. The nice thing about AMD's processors, as I understand it, is they come with their own cooler, which is right here. Probably not the best if you're going to do a lot of overclocking. I don't actually intend to do a lot of overclocking with this machine. It's really just mostly going to be kind of a home media server and a work from home kind of computer. But here you can see the thermal plate that it connects to the processor with to transfer the heat, and then it has spring-loaded retaining screws on either side, and then the power source and a nice big fan. It also comes with this handy-dandy little power. I'm not exactly sure. Oh, that might be for the processor. No, I'm not sure what that is. We'll find out when we put it all together here. But there's that. And then this is the actual processor. And set that aside for a moment. You can see all the little pins on the back, and I'm guessing that's just a sticker so you can put it on your computer to let the world know what you have inside your machine. That's what it looks like. And then we have our warranty item paperwork that most of us just throw away or don't even look at, but certificate of authenticity, so that's nice, I guess. Oh, here we go. And that's nice because it gives you some instructions that tell us how to do it. And I know this is upside down for you, but I just want to look at it for a moment. So it has an optional LED or RGB header as well, apparently, and that might be what that second cord is for. If you have a motherboard that has LED or RGB capabilities, you can plug that in so you can light up probably the fan, or possibly I think it would have to be the fan. In any event, not something that's huge on my list because it's going into a case that doesn't have any windows on it, so you never see it anyway, but there you go. So that's the first piece. I'll put things away for now. Our second piece, this is an HP SSD EX900 M.2 500 gigabyte SATA drive. Well, I suppose it's probably NVMe. It's PCIe port, so it plugs into your M2 slot and runs off the PCIe bus, which may mean nothing to some of you, but potentially it means it's going to go communicate on a different part of the computer than if it was just a straight SATA communicating on the SATA bus. Buses are just different kind of chips and pathways by which the various parts of the computer talk to the central processing unit, the brains. This is SMART, and I say that because there are actually periods between it. Smart supported, storage temperature -25 to 85 C, operating temperature 0 to 70 C, and I mean it's tiny. I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean this is my thumb. That's 500 gigabytes. It's amazing how much smaller that is compared to the old 3.5. Well, I mean the box that it's in right now is probably about the size of a 2.5 inch hard disk drive or a SATA box, what it would look like. And it's basically, you think about how big that box is, that's it. Kind of anymore it's kind of a waste, but the reason why they were built to that size is because then they would fit into standard slots where hard drives used to have to be, and for the hard drive they needed it to be that big in order to have the room for the platters. So that, I don't really feel like I need to take that out of this box as of yet. Plus I think, let's see if it's sealed or not. Sometimes these things I will need a scissors to cut it open. Nope. Okay, good. Ooh, and of course, the other thing about these, tiny little screw, is that it slots into the M2 slot like this, and then lays down, and then it has a tiny little screw that goes in here just to kind of hold it in place. And they make these in different sizes, different form factors, if you will, that are part of the numbering system of it. This one is a, well, I'm struggling to remember. I don't know if it says on the box. In any event, they have the length of the thing is actually part of the naming structure for it. So this is, I think, like an 80 millimeter, 8 centimeter long piece, as I recall. And that is important when you're deciding what size board you have and how much room you have in your computer to hold the pieces, because if you get the wrong size form factor, you may not be able to actually fit it all in there. In my case, I'm putting it into an ATX, a standard ATX computer, so that's really not a huge issue. So again, we'll put this back for now. Here's the next piece. This is Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 memory, specifically for AMD machines. It is, this is two 8 gigabit sticks for 16 gigabytes of, I said 8 gigabyte sticks for 16 gigabytes. It's rated at 2933 megahertz clock speed. And that, from what I read, is kind of about the top out for what these AMD chips are designed to run. So you'll see like you'll see like 3200 megahertz memory sticks out there in the market. And you know, I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff. I'll say that right now. But from what I've read, if you get a higher rated memory, the primary advantage is if you're going to overclock, the memory itself has some headroom to be able to handle that overclocking. And again, I'm not really planning to do overclocking on this machine, so this will probably be more than adequate for what I want to do. The only question is whether or not at some point I want to add more memory. So these LPX Vengeance memory sticks, as I call them, are interesting because I'm used to the old style where you just had the actual stick itself. You could actually see the various pieces of the various chips that were on it. And in this instance, they actually have this aluminum shroud that goes around them, which is really has a nice feel to it. It gives them a good weight, which probably will actually make it easier to seat them when I go to put them on the board. And you've got two very nice. And you start to see why nowadays people will put windows and stuff, or buy cases with windows built into them, because the componentry is not only it's fast, but now it's visually interesting as well. And so people want to show it off and build up their fancy gaming systems, which this is not going to be a gaming system, but still it'll be fairly quick, which is also part of the reason why I'm comfortable using the Ryzen 7 1700 series and these older pieces, which are probably, technologically speaking, are probably a couple years old, but still fairly current, still relatively quick, and it's more than adequate for my needs. All right, our next little piece is the Gigabyte GA-AX370 gaming motherboard. The motherboard is the component that all of the other components attach to at some level. This is where the central processing unit will be mounted, and the video card, and the hard drive, and memory. And this particular one, the old system was built with a Gigabyte motherboard as well. I like them. I like the fact that they have their dual BIOS systems and that they have a lot of power functionality to help. Basically, they have a lot of different capacitors and things on them that help them to stabilize the power source for the machine, which is especially useful when you're doing overclocking. Again, I'm not planning to do overclocking with this. It's got a bit more capability than I would want to have in it. The main reason why I chose this board and this particular setup was because this is one of the few boards on the market that will actually, on its own, as it's built, will support 8 SATA devices, and I'm planning to stuff this machine with a whole bunch of hard drives for backup. Well, really not so much for backup, but for storage. Most of the motherboards that are on the market right now, especially the so-called gaming motherboards, have only about 6 SATA ports on it. This again has 8. So for my purposes, it was going to be exactly what I needed, or at least was going to give me more capability. It's got USB 3.1 Gen 2 header on it, and it supports NVMe, which is what the internal SSD M.2 drive that I'm going to have in it. And it's AX370, which is again the last generation. Currently, I think think the current nomenclature is 470 for their top-of-the-line gaming. Just so you know, gaming is really just a marketing name. It really has nothing to do with the design of. I suppose at some level it has something to do with the design of the motherboards, in the sense that most gaming motherboards have got LED and things of that sort on them now. A lot of the stuff that, you know, if you want it to show off and be pretty and everything else, that's lovely, but it's not something that is of terrible significance to me. This motherboard supports DDR4 memory. It has the dual BIOS design, as I mentioned before. It has a Gigabyte App Center, which frankly I don't even know what that means at this point. That'll be something we'll figure out as we go along. And what else? It's designed for Ryzen chips, obviously. And let us open it up. And the cool part is, because of the way it's designed, I can open it up and show it to you that way. So, and here is the board. Of course, it's still in its original packaging. Let me make it a little difficult to see right now. I'm probably not going to open it up right this minute. I'll probably show a little bit more video later on where I actually take it out of the bag when I actually get ready to mount it to the computer itself. So then it also comes with a backing plate for this is where all the components that you plug into will come through. The nice part about this is the old Gigabyte one that I had, they were kind of, seemed like they were kind of cheaply made. They had like these little metal tabs that were kind of spring tabs, if you will, that kind of held it in place, but it just didn't have as nice of a finish as this one has to it. It makes it look really professional, like it was built for the machine. So when the box is done, it'll look like a professionally built box, like a store box. And it comes with a nice instruction manual that has how to install the chip and the CPU rather, and the cooling fan, where to plug things in. Of course, it's multi-language. Gigabyte is built in Taiwan, so obviously it's going to be a little bit rough on the language translation, but this is not my first time I've built a machine, so this is not going to be a huge problem for me. In any event, it also comes with, it looks like 4 SATA cables, so for half of it, and a longer installation manual with more information about it, and either a CD-ROM or DVD with probably some sort of stuff that things you can stay on. And of course, as with the Ryzen chip, it comes with its own little sticker, so again, you can advertise to the world what you actually have inside the machine. And again, I will probably give you more detail of this as I start to put the thing together, and we'll take it back out of the box and show it again. So here we have the Radeon RX570. Again, this is like a generation older. The current generation is the RX580. But again, I'm not really. This will still be a fantastic gaming machine if I wanted to be, but I'm actually not even planning to use it as a gaming machine. It's really just a workhorse for me. But the nice part is I plan to do. Part of what I plan to use this machine for is to store a bunch of older videos and things of that sort on, and like DVDs and things of that nature, and kind of make it a home server for media server for the various users in the house. We have 4 of us that might be accessing at any one given point, and so if I'm doing something that involves a lot of streaming where there's a lot of video encoding, decoding going on, this will be very useful for helping out and making a little less work for the CPU. So, I mean, compared to the old video card, and this thing is just unreal. It has got a frame back to it that makes it super stiff. It's got it's actually a dual slot, so it takes up 2 slots on the back of the computer, and it's got all the ports for HDMI. It actually looks like it supports 3 or 4 different monitors, depending on what you got. I'm sorry, it's got 1 HDMI port and 3 DP ports, which I might actually have to get a converter for that, because, well, no, I can run off of one of the, because it also has a DVI, so I can run off the DVI and the HDMI, because I have dual monitors set up right now. It has 2 big cooling fans. It's got pretty much a full-length set of cooling fins across it, and an exterior fan blow out of it, which is, I mean, it's just incredible how much they've come along with these things. It's also fairly heavy, which makes me a little concerned, because I hope the motherboard itself is going to be strong enough. And then, of course, it's got its own installation manual in multiple languages with pictorials. I don't think there's a whole lot of other than knowing what pins to connect what power pins to connect to it, because it has an external power source. I don't know, there's a whole lot of science to that, or that it would be terribly difficult to figure out. Now, having talked about the fact that I was disappointed that came out of there, the reality is I am doing this install with I'm intending to put Windows 10 on the machine, and I'm doing it off of a flash drive actually, and don't even have a DVD or CD drive to put into it. The machine has one in it right now, but it's old school IDE, PATA IDE, so uses the old type of plugs on it that this motherboard, the new motherboard I'm having, will not have on it. I have an adapter, but I'm not intending to use that. In any event, most of the time it's just drivers and stuff, and more often than not the drivers are already built on or included in Windows, and if not, after we upload Windows to it, it'll have base drivers that'll work with it, and then it'll automatically do an update, in which case we'll have all the correct drivers on it later. For our power supply, we have our EVGA Supernova 650p2. I actually bought this last year. This is an 80 plus platinum. The different 80 plus type of designation is a standard designation for the efficiency of the power supply, and this is fairly new, fairly highly efficient. They have like 80 plus bronze, gold, platinum. This is platinum, so it's a fairly high standard. I like having a nice big efficient power supply. This is 650 watts. The main reason again for getting something this large, because it's probably more than I would have needed for everything that I just showed you that we were planning to put in the computer. But again, I'm planning to put in some old mechanical drives. Those tend to use a bit more power, particularly if there's going to be several of them running at once. And so just wanted to have a little extra headroom. So this is probably more power than I need, but it means that I also have a lot of headroom to grow if I need to. Now, full disclosure, I actually did open this one before because I originally bought it to replace a power supply in another machine that I ultimately not do, so it won't look exactly, let me turn it this way so it's more visible, it won't look exactly like it did when it came from the manufacturer. This one has a nice manual that has the different versions, because this is the 650, they also have a 750 and 850. Very different from the old power supplies that I bought. I mean, it comes with this bag. It's like a canvas bag with all the different cables in it, and I mean, and the nice part is the cables too are labeled. This one says, I don't know if you can see it in the video, it says periph or peripherals. You've got CPU. That's probably an extension for, yeah, it looks like it's from a small like hard drive connector to a standard Molex connector. This is some sort of an adapter, probably like if you're going from a modern 8+4 to something else, maybe it gives you that adapter. The main power supply for the box itself, I mean the power supply, for the power supply, this is a 6-pin SATA to, looks like 3 different SATA power pieces on it, and then these are, I actually can't tell for sure what that one is, some sort of adapter. Oh, it's another SATA, and then I think that might be another SATA. So plenty of power adapters. And this is the interesting thing. In the old days, you'd get a power supply, and everything, all the wiring on the power supply was hardwired to it. And I'll probably show that when I pull out the old Enermax power supply that's in this machine, which was actually a fairly nice power supply, highly rated power supply when I bought it back in 2003. Of course, and it works, still works fine. But for modern stuff, modern case building, this is nicer because it's all modular like that, and you can just choose the pieces that you need to put into your system, which makes for a much cleaner build. And you'll see some of that. Right now, the old case, I actually had done some power management, or excuse me, cable management on it before, but when I open it up, if I do that on video, you'll see right now it looks like a total mess because I've been in and out of it several times. I've scavenged parts out of that to use in other machines for a while and eventually put them all back. This has got, here, turn it so you can see it on the camera. This is where all the different power ports hook up. You've got, looks like 3 different SATAs, turn it the other way so I can read it myself. Oh, that's the peripheral. And then you've got your motherboard power supply, CPU, and then I'm not really sure, but it says 2 different VGA powers. I don't know if that might be to power up the Radeon graphics card. And we'll obviously learn more about that as we go. And it's actually got an interior and an internal on-off switch for something that... okay, that might be to control the fan speed on it, because it says eco on-off, so it might actually just help to keep the system running more efficiently. In fact, that might be part of the reason why this is a 80 plus platinum, is because it's got that, where if you're running particularly if you're running some of these more modern CPUs that don't require as much power, then it will run in a cooler mode, maybe not have as much fan speed, so it'll be quieter as well. And you can see in the back, it's pretty much wide open. It's got this mesh on it, but compared to the old style where it had the fan grill and everything there, more like what you would see here, this is pretty well wide open, so it'll allow a lot of air to flow through. And the design of modern power supplies, they're as much a cooling source as they are a power supply, because you've got a huge fan on the bottom of this. It's got to be, my guess is it's probably at least 120 millimeter, and it sucks the air out of the heat rather. Usually, depends on how your motherboard is designed, but usually you'll have the CPU sitting kind of right here. Of course, the CPU has its own fan on it to help draw and extract the heat out of it, but then you've got this large fan that draws all the rest of that heat out and blows it out the back of the machine. And the way the Lian-Li, and we'll show that on video, is designed, it's a bit older tech, but even then, for the time, it was pretty smart, because it has two big fans on the front, well, big for the time, that draw fresh air in and keeps a positive pressure, and then you've got fans on the back and at the top that help draw the air out. So that is the power supply on the side here. I have to turn it so I can read it. It apparently is automatic switching, because it says 100 to 240 volts AC that it'll take in, and it's a 10 amp current draw. And it has 20 amps output on the 5 volt rail, 20 amps output on the 3.3 volt rail, and 54.1 amps on the 12 volt rail, positive rail, and a half amp on the 12 volt negative rail. And then you've got another 2.5 amp, it says plus 5 volt SB. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Some of the stuff I'm learning, because while I have some experience building computers in the past, I have not done much since probably 2003 when I built that machine. So in any event, that is the power supply. It's really nice. These were the components that I had to unbox for the moment, and we will probably move into the disassembly of the old parts and reassembly with the new parts.